Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Live, Laugh, What? I'm Liv, and this is our first video episode since I moved. Notice how nothing looks the same. I do miss my old set. I loved it so much, but we'll figure something out. This is just a little temporary sitch. Also, first video episode back literally since 2022. Mind-blowing. But we're jumping in with something very fun today that we have not done also since 2022. We're personality typing some of the characters from one of, I think, the most loved movies. And it's kind of funny, this is a movie that I feel like even people that weren't even alive during the time period that this movie came out, or like they were alive, but they weren't of the age to even watch this movie or even like truly, I don't know, connect on a deeper level with the vibes. We all still love this movie, and I'm talking about 10 Things I Hate About You. It's so funny because this movie almost feels like childhood to me, even though I was literally a toddler. But we're gonna dive into 4 of the top characters from this movie. We gotta start off first with Kat, obviously, my girl. Kat is so fun because to me, it immediately sticks out like, yeah, of course, like Kat is a 4. I feel like she's someone that I would almost use as like, she's the poster child of a type 4. And I actually typed her as a 4-wing 5, and that's because I feel like Kat does have that whole sense of like, she's on her own mission. She doesn't need like, some types are really built on connection. Like relationships are something that they almost need like air to breathe. Whereas Kat is very okay with, 1, being alone, 2, being misunderstood. And I think that's something that she's actually had to work through. I don't think that's something that she had initially, especially because if we think back when she's speaking with Bianca about the whole Joey Donner situation, and she's like, well, everybody else was doing this, so I did it. That's not something that I feel like you hear a lot from 4s, but I think when you're in a really pivotal time in your life, when you're in middle school, high school, and you're kind of having to figure out what's me and what am I okay with being me, even though it's not what everybody else is doing. Like, what am I willing to forfeit is kind of the thing that you have to go through when you're in those growing up years. And Bianca tried going the way of the crowd and she hated it. And what I do love though, and this again is very 4-wing 5 of her, she was like, ooh, I don't like it, and she put a stop to it. Whereas I feel like a lot of people, what they do is they don't like it, but they don't put stop to it because that would mean looking like a loser or not being like their friends or not having a way to kind of connect with their peers. But she didn't care about that. She cared about staying true to herself, and that's what you'll see from the type 4s. They are actually known as the individualist. Some have like the romantic individualist, some will call them that, but I feel like the individualist makes the most sense for them because I feel like that's the crux of where they're coming from with everything. And Kat really shows it off. Like, she is that type 4. And then I also chose that 5-wing for her because she does love books. Like, she loves getting in there, and she's obviously very interested in school. She's interested in diving deeper into the things she cares about. And she has like her little niche interests, which are very type 5 of her. She's really into music, and the people that like, you have friends or like someone that a coworker maybe, that they're in to their little niche things. And it's just like, you associate that person with their niche interest. And that's what I feel like about Kat. If I had to describe her in 3 words, like music extraordinaire would 100% be in there. She just loves it. She thrives. And that's what I think is cool about her. And that's why I chose a 5-wing versus a 3-wing. If you see a 4-wing 3, which we're actually going to kind of talk about this in the next episode. I'm really excited about it, but it's going to be a swap. A 4-wing 3 would be a little bit more, there would be some showmanship. There would be a little bit more charm. There'd be more wanting to go a little more with the crowd, even though they are the same core type of a 4. There would still be like wanting to be well received by others, and that's something that we see like Kat just kind of has no interest in, which more power to her. Next, I want to talk about Bianca. And it's so funny seeing this sister duo because even though they have connections and even though they're both in the heart triad, that's a little hint for you, they could not be further in terms of like the way that we perceive them. Crazy. But I think Bianca is a 2-wing 3. And this is again what I was saying about the type 3. So a 2-wing 3, they love their relationships with people. A 2-wing 3 is just like that is like the code for just like the popular kid at school. Even like a three wing two would be the same thing. But two wing three, she loves the idea of being pursued by these guys. She loves the idea of being well liked and being popular. And we see that that's something that she brings up a lot in the movie of like, she wants to be fun and outgoing and popular and you know everybody to like her. And so that's something that I find very funny, even though you know 2 and 4 do have a connection to each other aside from just being part of the heart triad, that these two sisters are so opposite because one is very like social focused and very relationship focused. The other is very inward, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but inwardly focused. Like they're focused on the individual versus the group. And that also kind of goes into subtypes. I'm not doing subtypes for this. I want to keep it short and sweet, but I think that's very interesting. So Bianca loves the idea of love and having a boyfriend, and she loves the idea of people finding her attractive and interesting. And that's just very teeny bopper girl, right? But I think too for Bianca, that's like a reflection of her worth, because sometimes twos can find a lot of their worthiness in other people's opinions. And that's where we see twos sometimes in average to lower health levels can struggle with people pleasing. And it comes out of that wanting to be well liked and well received. So there is something that I feel like if Bianca and Kat were a little bit more together in terms of their relationship, I think they could learn from each other a little bit more. And remember, 2 and 4 have that connection. And so I do feel like if Bianca were to look inwardly a little bit more, that she might be able to better draw some boundaries. She might be able to look at herself as an individual aside from the societal or group dynamics, if that makes sense. And I did choose a three wing because she is charming, she is fun, she is flirty. She's very much that typical cute three, you know what I mean? And if you've ever been around a three, like they just draw you in. They're charming, they're interesting, and I just think two wing three is perfect for Bianca. Okay, Patrick Verona. Oh my gosh. Okay. So Patrick and Kat are very interesting together. And you know, there's this whole lore about Patrick in the movie, right? People have made up his past in a way that is so crazy, but he doesn't care. He kind of finds it funny and he just doesn't care because he's his own person, right? He like does not care about himself with the group dynamics, which is the common denominator between him and Kat, even though they're in completely different triads. But that's usually a good thing because, you know, for a relationship, probably more so than a friendship, to work out, I think it is good to be in different triads, but still have connections to one another, or even have like each other's type in your tri-type. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I've mentioned the words tri-type and subtype, go check back for tri-types. Check out the Outer Banks episode. That one, I first get into tri-types and I do like a more deep dive into that. And then subtypes, ooh, I'm trying to remember. It's been a minute. I'll link it in the show description for you because I'm drawing a blank right now on what I would have done subtypes for. I will find it and link it below for you. But Patrick, I typed as a 7 wing 8. And I was kind of going back and forth on this. Like, is he an 8? Is he a 5? Is he a 9? Like, there are just some different things to play with here, but any way you slice it, I feel like Patrick, he just does him. And I think he finds things enjoyable about situations that maybe other people wouldn't, or like they just wouldn't really think to look that deep, if that makes sense. It's just his essence, you know? It's hard to describe somebody's essence, but I'm doing the best I can. I feel like Patrick is somebody that doesn't take life too seriously. He knows that other people don't get him and he's okay with it. I think he definitely has a 4 in his tri-type. And again, that goes back to what I was saying. Like, I think for relationships, it makes it work the best when you have connections in the tri-type somewhere or in a wing or, you know, you're in the same triad, that kind of a thing. I think that has to happen at some point. But for me, I think the crux of the matter for him is that he's just like looking to do him and he doesn't want the pressures on him of what's expected by his peers or by authorities. But yet, he's very focused on, he had that year away because he was taking care of a family member. And that I feel like for me is like, okay, there's loyalty there. He like thought it through and said, yeah, this is what I need to do. Even though it's going to take me out of like the, you know, the fun high school years. This is what I need to do. And I think there's something to be said for that, because other types maybe would be like, no, I can't miss out on, these super fun years of high school. He just does his own thing. He is a one-man band. So Patrick, I feel like 7, he is chasing like the fun moments in life, in terms of he's looking to squeeze all the juice out of the moments he's given for the most fun. I think that's the best way I can describe it, because he is such an oddball, man. I don't know. I feel like a lot of me wants to just type him as an 8, but I feel like that's just too obvious. I think in the scene that we see him singing to Kat, it's crazy and it's so out there, and he runs the risk of getting in trouble, but he's okay with it. But I mean, honestly, like, he really could go 8 wing 7. I don't know which he's acting out of most, head or gut, and this is where I feel like I want to know more about like his backstory, but we're only going with what we're given. I mean, there's strong case for him being an 8 wing 7. I might be talking myself into him being an 8 wing 7 the more I'm talking about this. This is interesting. But I do feel like he is a thinker, but he also does move a lot from the gut. This is why, do you see what I'm saying? And this is why sometimes it really is like, even when you're trying to find your personality type, it can be rough, because you know your motives, but sometimes they come out in different ways. And so then you're like, well, what am I doing this from? Then you go into like the whole, like, am I doing this out of trauma? Am I doing this out of like my actual wanting to do this? Like, there's so many layers to this, but I do feel like Patrick has a really equal 8-7 here. 7-8, whatever you want to call it. But he does seem to really be like, I want to have fun. I want it to be chill. Instead of working hard on what he should be working hard on, he's working hard to have fun. And that's what I love about Patrick. And that's why I think he and Kat are actually a really great mix, because they do connect. If Kat's a 4 wing 5, the 5 in her wing is in the head triad. And Patrick, if he's a 7, then he would be in the head triad with an 8 wing, which the 8 is in the gut triad. And so I do think in Kat's tri-type, she probably has an 8, so they probably connect on that too. 7 has a connection to 5. I don't know. It's just, there's a lot to go over here. Let me know your thoughts, because this one's actually a little bit stumping me. The more I talk about it, the more I talk myself out of what I thought. Lastly, we have to talk about my man Cameron. So Cameron is a fun one, because he arrives on the scene and boom, like eyes locked instantly. He's like, Bianca's the one. And it was cracking me up, because he's somebody that he saw her and it was like, boom, instant. Now, is this just teenage boy? Is this actually how he is on the regular? Because that kind of like instant reaction to me, my gut's like, ooh, 8. But he doesn't act 8-ish. So I did some deep digging and I go, what is it about Cameron? Well, he's Mr. Go with the Flow, which we love, but also, poses some problems. And I think it's funny because he's willing to do whatever to get Bianca, like out of not a sleazy way like Joey. He is a tough one, because I had 2 types I was going back and forth on with him, because I don't know how much of his reaction is just teenage boy and how much of it is truly him at his core, if that makes sense. So I had 2 types I was going back and forth on. The first one was a 6 wing 7, because I do feel like there was a lot of that loyalist aspect with him, right? The 6, if you don't know what the 6 is called, it is the loyalist. And sometimes it can be called like the skeptic, the skeptical loyalist. And so I feel like for him, he didn't have like the skepticism, which I feel like he should have had, because if he had had that, it would have kind of taken him away from some of the more bummer portions of what he experienced in this movie. But I do feel like he was very acting out of that loyalty, right? And even though things had kind of gone a little bit south with Bianca, like, he still came back around to her, even though some people might have been like, I'm done cutting you off. He didn't, so I do feel like there's play there. But the one that I feel like makes the most sense for him is a 2 wing 1. And like I said, I feel like he is acting from the heart a lot, and 2s and 6s are often mistyped for each other. That's the other thing, because again, 2s can be very loyal, and so I think people sometimes are like, well, if they're loyal, they're a 6, and you can't just throw everybody who's got, loyal traits into the 6 box, because that's just not true. 8s are very loyal, on and on. Anyways, the funny thing about Cameron and Bianca specifically, if Bianca's a 2 wing 3 and Cameron's a 2 wing 1, you might be going, they're both 2s, why do they act so different? Well, it's the wing, my friend. It is the wing. Also, their tri-types are probably different. I didn't tri-type them, but we can try and talk about it here in a second, and I can just throw out some possibilities. But for Cameron, he did act from the heart. He saw what he wanted and he's like, boom, I want it. And remember, 2 and 8 have a connection too. So he might have been pulling on some of that 8. And for Cameron, he was willing to do, like I said, whatever it took to get Bianca, but not in a sketchy way like Joey, who's like after a prize. Like he's fixated on like, I want what I want, not I want her because I value her. Where Cameron was like, she's a queen. I love her, you know? But Cameron is somebody that is very sweet and accommodating, and I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Like, he will go out of his way, overextend himself, which again, sometimes twos in average to lower levels of health can struggle, like I said, with people pleasing and overextending themselves. So I think in this situation, it's like, oh my gosh, like this is my sole focus now. Like I have to get this. And I think sometimes that causes you to slip a little bit in your health levels. But for Cameron, he does have this, and this might also be why he comes off more 6-ish. If you're a 2-wing 1, 1s are often mistyped for 6s as well. And so again, 2s are mistyped for 6s, 1s are mistyped with 6s. So I feel like, the 1 and the 6 also are very focused on doing what's right. And I think that's where Cameron acts with a lot of integrity, even though he's on board with this plan to basically make Joey pay for all this stuff in order to get what he wants. He's not the one actually doing it. And so I think in his mind, he's like, it's fine. I'm not the one doing this stuff. And so I think we see him write that off a little bit more, whereas a 1 probably would not be on board with that plan. But again, he's a 2. So I think that's fun. And I think he and Bianca work together because they are kind of like hard eyes, puppy love kind of vibe people already. And so I think they do kind of connect on that level in and of itself. Again, different tri-types, different wings, they act differently than the other, but I think you can still look and strip away some of that stuff and go, Cameron and Bianca feel very similar to each other. They almost feel like the male and female version of each other. And there is something very sweet that connects them, and I think they both do love. So that's why I ended up going with a 2-wing 1 for Cameron, even though I definitely think he has a 6 in his tri-type. Let's just try and quickly tri-type them, okay? So Cameron, I think, is probably a 2-6-1. That's easy, right? Because his wing is in a different triad. His 1 wing is part of the gut triad, so that's easy. We just had to figure out his head type, because remember, 2 is in the heart triad. So I think he's a 2-6-1. And then Bianca, she's a 2-7-9. I definitely think she's a 7 from the head triad, for sure. She wants to have fun. That's her main thing we see throughout the movie. She's like, Kat doesn't do this, so I can't have fun. She definitely feels like this isn't fair. Which maybe she has a 1 from the gut triad. Maybe not a 9. Yeah, no, I'm changing it right now. I'm changing it. So she and Cameron actually match on a lot of these. Okay, so if Bianca is a 2-7-1, that's fascinating. And Cameron is a 2-6-1. So they both have the 2 and the 1, which I think makes a lot of sense for them. Because Bianca, she says over and over, that's not fair. And I think she is a little bit more justice oriented. She looks at Kat and she's like, you won't give of yourself in order for me to have what I want, even though you know how bad I want it. And I think she views it as like, that's not justice being served. You should go out of your way. You should, whatever. I also feel like Bianca's taken on a lot of stuff that isn't hers to take on because of the family dynamic and the mother leaving and wanting to please her dad. But how much of her trying to please her dad is really a little bit of manipulation, which we can see from 2s that are in average to lower levels of health. How much of it is manipulation to get what she wants? How much of it is just being a teenage girl? These are things we can discuss. But I think that's actually really fun. That makes so much sense for Bianca and Cameron. And maybe that's why she wasn't initially attracted to Cameron in the way she was attracted to Joey, because Joey seems very opposite of Bianca in some ways. I think Bianca was like, Joey's more, maybe he felt a little bit more masculine and more driven, and maybe she thought that was like attractive because that's a little bit less of her, even though they do connect on the 3. But I think, like I said, I feel like Cameron and Bianca are almost mirror images of each other in certain ways, and so maybe it's initially like, oh, this is just a friend. But yeah, This is so fun. This is interesting. Okay, I'm glad we did this movie. This is like one of those cult classic movies that we all love. If you've not watched it in a while, go back and watch it with these types in mind and see what you think. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Be sure and check back for a brand new one next Tuesday and follow along on Instagram at Hey It's Liv James and at Live Laugh Wet Podcast. And I'll see you next time.